Picture someone who feels everything deeply but never breaks. Someone who can sit with pain, their own and others, without needing to fix it, escape it, or pretend it doesn't exist. They don't flinch when conversations get real. They don't change the subject when someone cries. They don't fill every silence with nervous laughter or shallow comfort. This person has learned something most of us never do. That feeling isn't the enemy. That emotions, even the heavy ones, aren't threats to survive. They're information to receive. They're messengers carrying wisdom about what matters, what hurts, what heals. When this person walks into a room, something shifts. Not because they're loud or demanding or dramatic, because they're present, fully, completely present. They don't need to perform or prove or protect. They just are. And that beingness creates space for everyone else to be real too. What if this was you? What would it feel like to move through your days without that constant background hum of emotional exhaustion? To stop bracing yourself against your own feelings like they're weapons pointed at your heart? What would it feel like to finally come home to yourself? But that's not where you are right now, is it? You've been running on empty for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to be full, not full of tasks or obligations or other people's needs, full of yourself, full of your own presence, your own truth, your own permission to feel what you feel without apology or explanation. Instead, you've become an expert at emotional management. You scan every room for who needs fixing. You smooth over tension before it can breathe. You swallow your own reactions to make space for everyone else's comfort. You've turned yourself into a human shock absorber, soaking up all the difficult feelings so no one else has to sit with the discomfort. And you're so tired. Tired of being the one who always understands. Tired of being the safe place for everyone else's storms while you weather yours alone in the dark. Tired of caring so much that you've forgotten how to care for yourself. Tired of giving from an empty well and pretending the water is still flowing. You tell yourself it's just who you are, that you're naturally giving, naturally empathetic, naturally strong. But there's something else underneath that story, isn't there? Something that feels less like choice and more like survival, less like generosity and more like strategy. You're not naturally selfless, you're strategically invisible. You learned early that your feelings were too much, too complicated, too inconvenient for the people who were supposed to hold them. Maybe it was the parent who called you dramatic when you cried. Maybe it was the teacher who praised you for being mature beyond your years. Maybe it was the friend who only called when they needed something, never when they wanted to give. So you made yourself smaller. You made your needs quieter. You made your pain prettier, easier to swallow, less threatening to digest. You became the one who gives, instead of the one who needs. Because somewhere along the way you decided that needing was dangerous. That feeling was selfish. That your emotional reality was a burden too heavy for anyone else to carry. But here's what you didn't realize. When you stopped letting people see your pain, you also stopped letting them see you. Carl Jung understood this pattern. He knew that our deepest healing doesn't come from avoiding our emotional fires. It comes from learning to walk through them. A person who has not passed through the inferno of their passions has never overcome them, Jung wrote. He wasn't talking about being consumed by emotion. He was talking about being honest with it, about letting it teach you instead of trying to teach it to behave. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've learned to hide, deny, or keep locked away. But your shadow isn't just the anger or jealousy or fear you won't let yourself feel. It's also your needs, your desires, your right to take up space in your own life. Your shadow is everything you've decided is unacceptable about being human. You've been living with a false self, a carefully constructed version of who you think you need to be to earn love, acceptance, belonging. This false self is competent, agreeable, endlessly available. It never has bad days or complicated feelings or needs that can't be met with a simple solution. The false self is always fine, always strong, always has it together, always has time for everyone else's problems, but never seems to have any of its own. It's the perfect friend, the perfect partner, the perfect child, the perfect employee. It's everything you think you need to be loved. But your true self? Your true self is tired of hiding. It's tired of pretending that other people's comfort matters more than your own honesty. It's tired of being the shock absorber for everyone else's emotional reality while your own sits unexpressed, unwitnessed, unheard. The numbness you feel isn't depression. It's not a chemical imbalance or a character flaw. It's your psyche's way of protecting you from a pain that feels too big to feel alone. You've been hurting in isolation for so long that your system has started to shut down, rather than keep reaching for connection that never comes. You haven't lost your capacity to feel, you've just lost your faith that anyone wants to feel with you. If this message found you at the right time, if you're finally ready to stop performing wellness while drowning in private, subscribe. Because what we're about to uncover won't be comfortable, but it will be true. The false self you've been wearing like armor is actually a prison. Every time you say, "I'm fine," when you're falling apart, every time you minimize your own struggles to make room for someone else's, every time you offer advice when what you really need is to be heard, you're choosing the prison. You're choosing to be useful instead of real, needed instead of known, safe instead of seen, and it's killing you slowly, from the inside out. You wonder why you feel so empty after giving so much, why you feel so alone in rooms full of people who love you, why you can't shake the feeling that nobody really knows you, even though you're surrounded by relationships. It's because you've been showing up as a function instead of a person, as a role instead of a soul, as a service instead of a self. The people in your life have gotten used to your emotional unavailability. They've learned to bring you their problems, but not to ask about yours. They've learned to expect your support, but not to offer theirs. They've learned to see you as the strong one, the stable one, the one who doesn't need what everyone else needs. And you've let them. Because it felt safer to be needed than to be vulnerable. Safer to be the giver than to risk being the one who asks and gets told no. Safer to be the one who has it all together than to be the one who's falling apart. But here's what you haven't considered. What if your emotional withdrawal isn't protecting you? What if it's actually creating the very isolation you're trying to avoid? When you hide your struggles, you rob people of the chance to show up for you. When you minimize your pain, you train others to minimize it too. When you make yourself emotionally unavailable, you create relationships that can only exist on the surface. You've been so afraid of being too much that you've become too little. So afraid of being a burden that you've become a ghost. Think about the last time someone asked how you were really doing. Not the casual, "How are you?" in passing, but the real question. The one that expects a real answer. Can you even remember? And if someone did ask, did you tell them the truth? Or did you deflect with a smile and turn the conversation back to them? You've trained everyone around you to accept your emotional unavailability. You've made it so easy for them to not see your pain that they've stopped looking for it. And now you're angry that they don't see it, but you're also terrified that they might. You're living in a constant state of emotional contradiction. Part of you desperately wants to be seen, to be known, to be held in your pain. But another part of you has built walls so high that even you can't see over them anymore. You've become an expert at emotional sleight of hand. You can redirect any conversation away from your own struggles in seconds. You can make someone feel heard and supported while revealing absolutely nothing about yourself. You can be fully present for others while being completely absent from your own experience. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be constantly performing wellness. It's exhausting to be the one who holds space for everyone else's emotions while your own remain homeless. It's exhausting to be so skilled at caring for others that you've forgotten how to care for yourself. Your pain is not a problem to be solved. It's a portal to be walked through, but you can't walk through it while you're busy pretending it doesn't exist. The mask you wear, the one that says you're fine, you're strong, you don't need help, it doesn't protect you. It buries you. It buries your truth, your needs, your right to be human in a world that demands you be superhuman. You've become a puppet, dancing to everyone else's expectations, while your own inner voice gets quieter and quieter. You've become so skilled at reading other people's emotional needs that you've forgotten how to read your own. But your body remembers. It remembers in the heaviness in your chest when you keep the peace instead of speaking your truth. It remembers in the tightness behind your eyes when you agree too quickly to avoid conflict. It remembers in the exhaustion that sleep can't fix because it's not physical tiredness, it's soul tiredness. Your body remembers in the way your stomach clenches when someone asks if you're okay and you're not. It remembers in the way your shoulders carry the weight of everyone else's expectations. It remembers in the way your throat closes when you want to cry, but can't let yourself break. You're not broken, you're buried under years of other people's expectations, under the weight of being the one who never needs, under the pressure of being emotionally perfect in an emotionally messy world. The numbness isn't absence, it's presence, the presence of so much unfelt feeling that your system has had to shut down to cope. It's like a circuit breaker that's been tripped to prevent the whole house from burning down. But here's the thing about circuit breakers. They're not meant to stay tripped forever. They're meant to be reset when it's safe to let the power flow again. You've been living in emotional darkness for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to have the lights on. You've forgotten what it feels like to be fully alive, fully present, fully yourself. The false self isn't evil. It served a purpose. It kept you safe when being real felt dangerous. It helped you survive when surviving was all you could do. But surviving isn't living. And you're ready to live now, aren't you? You're ready to stop being who you think you need to be and start being who you actually are. The tragedy isn't that you're hurting. The tragedy is that you're hurting alone. The tragedy is that you've become so good at carrying your pain in silence that you've forgotten how to let it speak. You've forgotten that your pain has a voice, and that voice deserves to be heard. You've been living as if your emotional world doesn't matter, as if your inner experience is less important than everyone else's outer comfort, as if your feelings are inconvenient interruptions to the smooth running of everyone else's lives. But what if your feelings aren't interruptions? What if they're invitations? Invitations to deeper connection, to authentic relationship, to the kind of love that can only exist when someone sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stay. Notice when you're about to say, "I'm fine today." Pause. Feel the weight of that lie in your mouth. Ask yourself, what would happen if you told the truth instead? Not the whole truth, not your deepest wounds, but just one small real thing about how you're actually doing. What would happen if you said, "I'm struggling" instead of "I'm fine"? What would happen if you said, "I'm tired" instead of "I'm great"? What would happen if you let someone see you as human instead of superhuman? Notice when you're about to offer advice to someone who's struggling. Ask yourself, what would happen if you said, "That sounds really hard," instead of trying to fix their problem? What would happen if you let them feel their feelings without needing to make them feel better? What would happen if you stopped being the solution and started being a witness? Notice when you're about to minimize your own struggles, when you're about to say, "It's not that bad," or "Other people have it worse," or "I shouldn't complain." Ask yourself, what would happen if you let your pain be as big as it actually is? What would happen if you stopped comparing your insides to other people's outsides? Your emotions are not the enemy. They're messengers. They're trying to tell you something important about what you need, what you value, what matters to you, but you can't hear the message if you're too busy silencing the messenger. The sadness you won't let yourself feel is trying to tell you what you've lost. The anger you won't let yourself feel is trying to tell you what you value. The fear you won't let yourself feel is trying to tell you what you need to protect. But you've been so busy managing everyone else's emotions that you've forgotten how to receive the wisdom of your own. The people who truly love you don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be real, but you've been so afraid of being real that you've forgotten what real even feels like. You've been living in exile from yourself, but exile is a choice, and you can choose to come home. Coming home to yourself doesn't mean becoming selfish or dramatic or needy. It means becoming honest. It means letting your inner world be as important as your outer world. It means treating your own emotions with the same care and attention you give to everyone else's. It means remembering that you're not just a supporting character in everyone else's story. You're the main character in your own. But coming home requires courage. It requires the courage to disappoint people who have gotten used to your emotional unavailability. It requires the courage to be seen as less than perfect. It requires the courage to need things, to want things, to be human in a world that has rewarded you for being superhuman. You've been so afraid of being rejected for who you really are that you've never given anyone the chance to love who you really are. You've been so busy being who you think they want that you've forgotten who you actually are underneath all the performance. The loneliness you feel isn't because you're unlovable. It's because you've been hiding the parts of yourself that are most worthy of love. You've been offering people a sanitized version of yourself and then wondering why the connection feels shallow. Deep connection requires deep honesty. It requires showing up with your whole self, not just the parts that are easy to digest. It requires letting people see your mess, your struggles, your needs, your humanity. You've been living like your emotional world is a burden to be managed rather than a gift to be shared. But your emotions are not a burden. They're the very thing that makes you human. They're the bridge between your inner world and the outer world. They're how you connect, how you create, how you love. When you hide your emotions, you hide yourself. When you minimize your pain, you minimize your humanity. When you make yourself emotionally unavailable, you make yourself spiritually invisible. You weren't born to be a supporting character in everyone else's emotional drama. You weren't born to be the one who gives but never receives. You weren't born to be the one who holds space for everyone else's feelings while your own remain homeless. You were born to be fully, completely, authentically yourself. You were born to feel deeply, to need freely, to love boldly. You were born to be seen and known and held in your fullness, not just your functionality. The world needs your emotional truth. It needs your pain and your joy and your fear and your love. It needs your whole self, not just the parts that are convenient or comfortable or easy to handle. You've been living like your emotions are a problem to be solved when they're actually a language to be spoken. They're how you communicate with the world about what matters to you. They're how you let people know who you are and what you need. But you can't speak a language you won't let yourself learn. You can't communicate needs you won't let yourself have. You can't be known for who you are if you won't let yourself be who you are. Here's the truth you've been avoiding. You can't heal what you won't feel. You can't transform what you won't acknowledge. You can't overcome what you're still running from. Jung's inferno isn't about being consumed by your emotions. It's about being honest with them. It's about letting them burn through you instead of burning you up. It's about trusting that you're strong enough to feel what you feel without being destroyed by it. The fire Jung wrote about isn't the fire of destruction. It's the fire of transformation. It's the fire that burns away everything that isn't really you, so that what remains is true. It's the fire that melts the mask, so your real face can finally be seen. You've been afraid of this fire because you think it will destroy you, but the fire doesn't destroy who you are. It destroys who you're pretending to be. It destroys the false self that's been protecting you and imprisoning you in equal measure. The numbness isn't protecting you anymore. It's just keeping you from living. The emotional walls you've built to keep the pain out are also keeping the love out, the connection out, the life out. You have a choice to make. You can keep living as the person who has it all together, who never needs help, who's always fine. You can keep being useful and needed and safe. You can keep surviving. Or you can choose to be real, to be seen, to be human, to let people love the actual you instead of the performance you've been giving. This isn't about becoming weak or needy or dramatic. It's about becoming whole. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you've been keeping in exile. It's about letting your inner world be as rich and complex and worthy of attention as your outer world. You don't have to hurt alone anymore, but you do have to choose to stop hiding. The inferno Jung wrote about isn't punishment, it's purification. It's the burning away of everything that isn't really you, so that what remains is true. It's the fire that transforms coal into diamonds, pressure into pearls, wounds into wisdom. You've been afraid of your own fire for so long, you've forgotten that fire doesn't just destroy, it also creates. It clears the ground for new growth. It lights the way in the darkness. It warms the cold places in your soul. Your emotions aren't the enemy. They're the energy that will fuel your transformation, but only if you stop running from them and start running toward them. Only if you choose to feel instead of hiding, to be real instead of performing, to live instead of surviving. The choice is yours. It always has been. You can choose to keep living as half of yourself, showing up as a function instead of a person, giving from an empty well while pretending it's full. You can choose to keep being the one who never needs anything, who never struggles, who never breaks. Or you can choose to be whole, to be human, to be real. You can choose to let your pain be as big as it actually is. to let your needs be as real as they actually are, to let your emotions be as important as they actually are. You can choose to stop being who you think you need to be and start being who you actually are. This choice isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. It's choosing authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, connection over safety. It's choosing to be seen over being perfect. It's choosing to trust that you are worthy of love not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Not because of how you serve others, but because of how you honor yourself. The false self has kept you safe, but it's also kept you small. It's kept you hidden, but it's also kept you lonely. It's kept you needed, but it's also kept you unknown. You don't have to choose between being loved and being real. You don't have to choose between being needed and being seen. You don't have to choose between being useful and being human. You can be all of these things, but only if you choose to be yourself. Only if you choose to feel instead of numbing. Only if you choose to show up as you are instead of who you think you should be. The choice is yours. It always has been. What truth hit you the hardest? Write it below. Share the thing you've been keeping hidden, the feeling you've been avoiding, the need you've been denying. Let this be the first step toward coming home to yourself.